Welcome back, guys. This is episode 5 of the Infamous Performance podcast. If you've been liking our episodes so far, stay up to date with our Instagram, which is Infamous Performance Podcast. And we'll be going over, we just had a guest on episode 4. Today we're going to be going over some more stuff to do with the gymnastics side of what to do coming out of lockdowns, stuff like that. So let's get straight into it.
Yeah, so as we spoke about in episode 3, if you have listened to it, it's kind of coming out of lockdown, what this is going to look like in terms of just overall training structure. However, today what we're going to do is kind of look at more the specific gymnastics side. So Tristan, just massive gymnastic enthusiast over the last couple of years. We wanted just to give you guys a solid understanding of how to build your gymnastics back, and kind of even better when we go back into the gym, because as we spoke about in episode 3, it was just about starting slow, rebuilding that base. So over this episode we're going to take you through the steps that we use for our own development and then also for clients. You've taken a little more people through gymnastics than I potentially have. Kind of the skills, the strength, the endurance, and then kind of finally how to implement it into a workout safely. So there is a lot of steps that you should really go through to make it more safe, more efficient, and then in turn like a higher ceiling so you can perform better. Yeah, because what we classically see is you get, like today we'll use muscle up as an example, you'll get your first muscle up and then you'll just kind of throw it into a workout, and then you might only be able to do 5 muscle ups and you'll be stuck on that for years to come. So what we're going to talk about, break it down into nice manageable steps, which you can basically use for a lifetime to keep progressing further and further. Continuing
that strength cycle in the gymnastics.
Yeah, exactly.
Because as we know, if we look at CrossFit specifically to do with the gymnastics side, we know it's got quite a bad repertoire with shoulder injuries. And I'm sure if you go to most osteopaths or someone, they'll go, "Oh yeah, CrossFit, yeah, you get, I'm doing well out of your business." And it gets a bad sort of report from that. But what we realise now that it's down to bad technique, not moving very well. So specifically, we can go to the classic pull up to do with this. If we go to the kipping pull up, we know outside of the CrossFit scene in the fitness industry, it's called the cheating pull up. It's crap, it's rubbish. CrossFitters know why we do it, if you do know the process towards it. But what gets mixed up, and I think a lot of people get muddled up because they get so caught up on the cycle of the metcons that they need to learn the kip first, and they miss out the basic training, the continuum of strength training through gymnastics to build to kipping or the butterfly, as we see, which we know is used to get more volume out in CrossFit for a quicker time. But the continuum of strength with that movement is pretty much capped. So by trying to do more sets of butterflies isn't going to get you stronger. That's when you've got to flip back to your strength stuff and go back to back to basics with it.
And kind of go through the stages that we're going to talk about. Unfortunately, I think it's personally, it's no fault of people's own coming into a CrossFit gym and getting that. I think it's just a lack of knowledge from kind of the top down and then also the top up, as the bottom up as well. So that's all we're going to do today, is basically break down how to, and this can use equate across the board with all gymnastics. But we're going to look at the muscle up today. But this is
I think we'll start with the muscle up because we know it's quite a good looking.
Well, it's sexy.
It's impressive, isn't it? If you're in a gym or something, you pull a bar or a ring muscle up, especially strict. People are looking at you and thinking, "Wow, that's crazy." Like you see the bar stars, calisthenic guys doing. It's nice. So I think if we follow with this today, but by all means, what we're talking about today follows with everything from the pull up, from the toes to bar to pistol squat, anything that you're looking at progressing through that you haven't quite got. This protocol will help you get there, and it's just really starting back from the beginning with it and building up through basics. So, if I go back to when I started CrossFit,
because your journey with kind of gymnastics,
and this is where I can separate two movements quite far apart. So obviously, looking at CrossFit, I was mesmerised by the ring muscle up straight away. So I bought a set of rings, and I just try to find as much info as I can, and I just started practicing it. Now, I did get my first ring muscle up within, I think it was 4 weeks of trying it, and that wasn't because I was amazing at gymnastics. It was just because of my bodybuilding background had a lot of pulling work in it. And I was at school as a kid who couldn't do pull-ups or hang on the monkey bars. So as soon as I got myself into a normal gym, I was obsessed with the pull-up, and I became very, very good. And I built up big volumes of numbers. So I think my max set is like 28 strict pull-ups. So I built up a lot of range through that strength. So getting the muscle up wasn't too much of an issue.
But as we see when we go onto the board, you'll see that
the first part I've already done,
you've already done
without knowingly done. Where if you go to my handstand stuff, now we're going the complete opposite. Even though I had big shoulders and a big chest and the pushing range is good, you could see that I just didn't quite have the stability. And probably the biggest thing for me overhead was the range of motion and mobility work that needed to be put in first before I was trying to do handstand push-ups and then getting caught into that trap where I've seen, well, I can't do a strict, let me just kip because it's a lot easier. And it is, but it's not the right thing to do. As I say, one thing I learned is strict before you kip. I think that's a good saying. If you can't do it strictly first, don't try and kip it.
I think,
build it up.
They do. I remember they teach that in your level 1, but it can, as you said at the beginning, it does kind of get lost. Like if you can't do a handstand, like you said, you're like, well, I can achieve it if I use a little bit of momentum from my lower body. So it's kind of skipping stages.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of isolation work. And then this is where with both the pulling or the pushing movements, we got to look at the scaps, which I think doesn't get spoken about enough when it comes to this scapular control, how it rotates and pull the shoulder blades down and up and keeps it into a safe pattern for you then to be able to stay out of the shoulder, especially when you can start kipping and doing all the good volume stuff for the Metcon. So it's really like starting from a basis, isolating positions, like how do your scaps move? Can you do a scapular push-up? Can you do a scapular pull-up? That is definitely. Can you hold those positions? So starting with some isometrics there. So that is definitely a point we could look at. So if we're going to, obviously everything's got a different road. So if we come back to the ring muscle up now, I suppose we've got to look at some support positions. Stability, like being able just to hold the rings down by the side in a support position, you'll find is pretty tricky. Like remember when I first done that, I was shaking like a leaf, elbows were bent, shoulders were up into the ears, and it takes a little bit of understanding that first of all to be able to start getting the stability.
That's kind of the perfect point to move into the board. Like the first thing you want to do is, like as you said, just be able to do the movement on its own. That's the key. So breaking down the movement that you want and working on pieces on their own. So no cardio, no other bits of conditioning or any other movements. It's just particularly working on this on its own and starting to get used to it. So breaking it down. So with the ring muscle up, we can break that down. So we've obviously got the pulling portion, we've got the pushing portion into the dip, we've got the transitional phase. Okay, so we can look at each part of that. So being able to start with some isometric holds, like simple things on the floor, holding a solid plank or front lean rest plank, building up that core stability, understanding what the hips are doing as well, because they play quite a big importance in it, and starting to build through those ranges. If you haven't got a pull up, obviously you'd be looking to do this with the pull up phase, but with a ring muscle up, you're going to need quite a good bit of number of pull ups before you can start working on the rings. A base of strength for sure, and that's with this is kind of you want to, if you don't have a movement, you want to work towards a ring muscle up, but you don't have a pull up. You can still work the kind of the pattern of it, as you said. You could do at the top holds. You can. Well,
I still think ring rows is probably one of the most underestimated pulling positions you can do. If you're doing ring rows correctly, try and do 10 to 15 with a good little bit of tempo in it. It's gonna break you down quickly. Just getting those scaps to hold in the right position, getting the lats firing up, and it's great for building up pull-ups or the muscle up, anything with a pulling range. But you get a lot of people, especially when we're in classes, and you go, right, I think you should use the rings, and they roll the eyes and think like it's school, like basic work. Yeah, it is basic work, but you need to master that basic work to move on. Especially if you're going to go into now in a Metcon environment now where you're putting volume and intensity into that movement, you need to pull back to something that you can stay technically sound with, so you don't hurt yourself. But now you're building momentum out of that Metcon with the movement, rather than going to something that you're breaking down, and then you realise halfway through, oh, I need to scale back to the rings. You've lost the purpose of the Metcon. You've just lost the purpose of everything. So,
and I think this is kind of the first bit where you're just doing it alone and you're just building the pattern of the movement.
Yep.
It's going to take the longest. And as we know, you were, when you came into the CrossFit industry after your bodybuilding, you might not have had the pattern, but you had the strength. So you'd basically done this.
I've done a lot of the protocol work, yeah. So I've done a lot of the isolation work with the scaps. I've done a lot of the pulling work. So I had a good, strong base. It's just now pulling into technique and transitioning from the pull into the push with the ring muscle up, which I found not incredibly easy, but I got the time where that took me, say, 4 weeks. That could take someone 2 years.
Yeah, and it's just different adaptation.
It's the different adaptation. So we could put loads of different avatars on here, from young to old, from training to beginner to training for 10 years. So it all depends on the individual, and that's why you really got to look at yourself there and think, like, where do I fit into this category? Have I done a lot of this alone work and isolation work prior to this, or am I complete basic from the beginning? So you've got to go straight. And even I still think for everyone, go back to basics. Even if you're a superstar, go back. Oh, yeah. You got to revisit the basics.
Oh, for sure. When we kind of map this out, you'll see that how we now still use the same basic movements. Like you use ring rows. The ring rows are a killer. Oh, you do it with tempo. You do it with good position.
And not only that, it's like when you're not consistent with the movement. So when I've got up to a really good standard with my rings, and then I've gone into a different cycle aspect now. We're going, right, I'm going to move. I want to concentrate a little bit more on my legs and building up squat and some range somewhere else. And you sort of fall away from that consistency with it. When you come back to it, and I think, oh yeah, I've done 7 strict. Wow, I'm back to. I've already fallen down the chart, because it's like with everything. And I think that's very hard with CrossFit, is staying up to scratch with everything. Once you've mastered movements for a long time, then you probably can flick in between. But I'd say I got good at the muscle ups, but I didn't get substantially that good that they're in sheer volume. The technique and everything's still there, but build. And then it's like going back through the chart, what we're going to see today, and going, right, now I need to build up some volume.
That's the thing. You've got the pattern, and
I've got the pattern.
And it's still there.
I've got the pattern, but now I need to come back down the chart, because I haven't done them for a while, and start to slowly build up volume, rather than going, oh no, I've got muscle ups. I haven't really done a Metcon with high volume of muscle ups for like 3-4 months, and then going into a Metcon and doing them. You're gonna feel really fucking shitty next few days after, even though you might get a few good, really clean reps. Somewhere along the line they're gonna start pulling out technique. So building up the volume, and that could be something that now, once you've got maybe like a single good rep, you can now start to build up maybe for an EMOM phase, and that could be a cycle of however long you want it. So building up one EMOMs, 1 rep every, say, 90 seconds. So you're getting plenty of recovery.
And that's the key, recovery with that. It's not trying to... we can go into a complete rabbit hole with EMOMs and how they're kind of misinterpreted.
Very misinterpreted. I think the main thing you've got to look at that, and one thing I've really learned through doing more gymnastic side of it, is a progressive overload adaptation sort of like way of through your gym. It's basically staying away from failure. Yeah. So not doing max sets of repetitions all the time, because you're just gonna. It's not. What you need to do is start to build up the volume over sets. But staying 2-3 reps away from failure each set, and then that's how you can put more bulk of volume into your gymnastics, whether you pull-ups or your rings or everything. But doing sets where you're constantly failing down on your last rep,
you're building bad.
Well, you've gone back to bad patterns without you even knowing. But now you know that your second set is now a rep less. Your third set's probably a rep less. So you're not really getting anything out of that, because you're thinking, I've just got to keep pushing harder. Where it's like, no, try and break it down. And that, even if that means by using accessorizing the movement, you can do like the muscle up from the floor. You know,
Perfect.
Great way of doing it and starting to build up volume. Or you can use a band once you start to really build. Like I know for me, building up my bar muscle up, once I had a good couple of 2-3 reps in the tank, sometimes with my training, I'd put a band on just to creep over that little bit, but it's not letting me go to failure.
Yeah,
you know?
and that's the thing with this added volume, and this can be like week on week. You add like 1 rep a week, and that's what we're talking about. How it is a slow progression, but it's building a ceiling that's even higher than you are before. Instead of being like, oh yeah, 1 week I did 3 sets of 1, the next week I'm going to do 6 sets of 1 because they felt easy. It's like, just because they felt easy, that, as you said, is the key.
Yeah.
Full recovery between every single rep. You won't be blowing out your ass, you won't be sweating all over the floor, but you'll be working the pattern even better whilst increasing your volume.
Yeah, because another big thing we see when someone gets their first ring muscle up, they go, right, I've ticked it, that's off the box, I've got 1 muscle up.
10 reps.
Here we go, Metcons, let's do it. And you're like,
30 reps for time.
And then all they do now is they learn a bad movement pattern over that rep, because now they've picked whatever Metcon they've tried to do, because now they can do 1 rep, they think they're now qualified to put that into a high intensity sort of like environment with more volume. And it's like, no, all they're going to learn now is how to do muscle ups badly, and then eventually down the line probably get an injury, or just stay moving really badly with them and not understanding why they're not getting over a certain amount of reps over a certain amount of time.
And that leads us on to kind of stage 3.
Stage 3.
How, as we said, we kind of, I don't even know if I spelled that right. Probably didn't. As we said, this is kind of how to build into like a workout as well, and just build efficiency. So once you've got to a point where you can do it with that added volume, and maybe this is taking 10 weeks, maybe you've got at the end it's 10 times 1, but you know every rep is on the money, you can start adding elements into like a really slow steady workout where you do sort of like maybe 60 seconds of 50-60% air bike into 1 rep, five sets, something like where you're adding a little bit of a higher heart rate, but you're not going straight into doing Fran into muscle ups. So at the same time, you're going to lose that pattern. You're not going to be building efficiently, and you're just going to be trying to throw as much volume as possible.
Yeah, and then just learn how to move bad, and just not really, just stop yourself from going as far as you can go with it.
So this is just a point where you're starting to slowly add a little bit more.
You're starting to slowly now introduce the fitness side into the Metcon with the skillful movement.
But it's easy.
But it's easy. It's not like right now you're doing a Metcon and it's for time. It's like you're bringing in that aerobic or that anaerobic sort of side of fitness into it steadily over time, with still continuing with your good reps that you've now learned and you're starting to master, with still revisiting back between 1 and 2. So it's not like you just move on and they're never seen again. It's like that could still be part of your program, doing, still continuing through the scapular control work, building up the patterns. Certainly still 100%, I say, staying on isometrics, because they're fantastic.
Beautiful.
And then you're now slowly bringing in the conditioning side. So whether it's a row or a bike or maybe a ski, depending on, and then slowly introducing that over time.
I think, and kind of, just because it's easy doesn't mean you're not doing it correctly. And that's a big myth in it, like the whole kind of no pain, no gain. If you're not on the floor at the end of it, you didn't get a good workout. No, you're building something you're building for years to come. So just because every workout's not hard doesn't mean it's bad. You're building the pattern here, and you're still building some fitness. And as you said, and then the same progression is from here. You do the exact same thing. I'm going to go here, if you can see. Number 4 is you're doing stage 3. You're just adding volume. Like simple as this could be a 12-week cycle where you're doing this and you're just building sets. You go 4 sets, you go 5 sets, you go 6 sets, and the exact same thing as kind of level 2 or stage 2 of it. It's still easy. It's still easy, but you're just getting used to doing a little bit more, like small steps.
Non-fatiguing.
Exactly.
Staying away from that fatigue zone. Non-fatiguing sets and reps and easy work, I think, and then building up for the volume. And this will be a point, and you go, right, okay, so what happens here? When do I start learning how to kip? And I think once you realise the strength parts of the movements and you've got them up to a good number, and then you've worked through the strict work, then you can start to introduce the kipping phase. It's probably not going to take you near as long to learn, but that's definitely down the line to come back to. So I'd say
if you do all of these stages with a purely strict, then when it comes to redoing this in a kipping fashion or a butterfly fashion,
you're gonna see good volume there. Instead
of kind of going like up, dropping down, going up, dropping down, you're just going to fucking skyrocket. Your progression of your muscle ups is going to flop.
And having consideration in where you are as an athlete and the time it can take you to get there. Like I say, someone might be really strong in these areas, so they can go through it a lot quicker, like I did with the ring muscle up. But with my handstand, complete different story. And how to work out the stability, range of motion for that a lot, holds. And building that up slowly, and then working back. For me, building up the stability was more than the actual handstand push-up, and then I could bring back in the handstand push-up, but learning it in a way now where rather than just trying to kick up against the wall with that big arch back and just forcing it out, and then I learned now how to stay straighter and start with a simple phase, through the pattern. So starting with a pike handstand push-up just on the floor, like a down dog handstand, and then building up through that way. Where I would have looked at that a few years ago and go, oh no, I'm not doing that, that's too easy. Once you do it right, it's not easy, and that's when you find your weaknesses. Moving through it. But getting back onto this, complement.
Stage 5. Complementary movements.
So we all know, the ring muscle up is a big pull and a push at the top with a dip. So what would be a complementary movement? Simple air squat could be complementary.
Yeah, simple air squat. Then you could you could do air squat. Then you could work it into a little bit more fatigue when you go and push up. But what you're trying to do is potentially you're maintaining the easy cyclical work. So for example, you're maintaining the bike and you're just progressing from this workout. You're doing your bike, you're doing your one muscle up, and then maybe you're adding some squats, or you're doing a hinge position, or maybe even just like a couple of pull-ups. But what you're doing is you're just slowly building a little bit more level of fatigue, but not through the exact same movement pattern.
Yeah.
Because what you find is we've probably all done open workouts that are very, very pull heavy. Okay, so say rowing and dumbbell snatch. At the end of it, your pulling mechanics are going to be fried.
Grip's going to be hard.
Your lats are going to be fatigued. Chucking a pull-up on that same workout, and you've just basically got a triple pull movement, and you're going to be fatigued. If you've not trained that slowly and gone through these stages, you're going to fry so much quicker. So adding that little element of fatigue in something that's complementary, so it's not going to fatigue your pulling. So you can still work stage 1. So ultimately, it's not just like once you've stepped on, you forget about this.
Yeah.
Every step, you're still trying to focus on, you're building better pattern, you're slowly building a bit of volume. You're building your fitness with a little bit of volume and so on and so forth. So yeah, stage kind of 5 of it is complementary movements, but still easy.
And then maybe still down there, now we're bringing in complementary. That doesn't mean just chucking in volume straight away.
No.
So the next stage with that would be complementary with volume. So doing now more reps of that workout that you've been practicing. So maybe you're chucking in a few more calories on the bike. Maybe the complementary movement, you're going, right, I'm going to up that with this, and then again, so you're looking at fatigue zone, and then you're obviously going to see the non-fatigue zone, and then you're obviously going to see starting to hit some fatigue.
Yeah, and you'll start to see, and that's, as I said, when you, and kind of I think for us as where we have got to now in our journey, it's understanding that a workout, as soon as you start to break down, it's okay to stop.
Yeah.
It is perfectly okay. So for me personally, I love a kind of a 4 to 6 rounds. You get to round 4 and you're like, okay, that was all right. You get to round 5 and you're like, yeah, I'm really breaking down. Stop there. And that's okay, because you're still working good, efficient movement patterns. You're still getting a little bit of volume. You're still getting that kind of fatigue through the complementary movement and easy cyclical work. But you're not going to a point where you're completely falling off, losing efficiency of movement, and then in turn reducing your ceiling or your potential for that movement itself. So yeah, number 6 is build complementary movements,
complementary
volume,
builds.
and still taking it easy. As we said, when we get back round to this is why I've done it in like this way, because
It goes round.
It's-
Revisit, back, start again. You know, and I think that's what a lot of people do. They think they've mastered the movement, like the bar muscle up or handstand push, all the high skill movements, and then they just think by doing it, and doing more volume of it is going to create more of it. Where for some of us, we could probably still pick them out and go, well, you're not using your hips right here, you're not got a good tight line there. You know, there's so many things we can still pick and point to make it look good. So that's what's going to bring the overall volume that you're looking for, staying tighter, keeping it skillful, keeping it, you know, staying on that technique, just like you would with a snatch. You know, when we do our snatches, we know if they're technically sound, they're going to be nice and smooth. But as soon as that technique's sort of out, you're missing it, it's all over the place, it gets messy, you burn more energy.
You're less efficient.
When you're less efficient. And I think that's the thing that people don't look at the most when it comes down to the gymnastic sides. If you're not efficient, you're using more energy because you're doing probably bigger swings or bigger movements. You're bringing in other muscle groups. You're using more energy. Your lungs are puffing out more because you're doing more, where if you was to tighten it up and spend time, the tighter it gets, the less of energy you use, the more efficient you become.
I don't think it's quite easily missed because it is a body weight movement, and you look at maybe a clean and jerk for 10 reps at 70 kilos, you're like, okay, it's heavy, I need to focus on moving well. But you look at 10 pull-ups, and you're like, well, it's 10 pull-ups, it's body weight, it's not heavy loaded,
that's it, and that's exactly it, because there's no weight in your hands. People but you're now pulling your body weight, which is, you know, for some of us guys, or you know, if you're tall, it can be quite a good bit of weight that you need to move around, especially through those smaller muscle groups. You know, especially coming out of lockdown as well. If you've not been too tight on a diet and you put on a few more pounds, then this is definitely that time to look at building the basics and building back better through movement patterns and technique, and building up your gymnastics for whether it's for your CrossFit or not.
Number 7, how you progress from kind of complementary and you've built volume, you've got more comfortable with that. The next one's non-complementary. So you do like a bench or ring muscle ups. So heavy push into a push. Into a push, or you wouldn't do pull-ups, but you can do some sort of rowing
again,
snatch, muscle ups.
So now that's what we're going from. So complementary means obviously not the movement pattern that you're doing, and then non-complement means basically you're doing the same movement pattern. So now you're pushing definitely into more fatigue zone now, because now you're not getting a rest. So I'm sure you've done many Metcons where you've gone maybe from an air squat into a thrust or something like that, and you realise, holy shit, this is tough. Or like an assault bike into a thrust or a squat movement, and you realise, wow, my legs are... That's a more of a, you know, non-complementary sort of setup. Fatigue is going to settle in a little bit quicker, which means training for that takes time.
But then I think with the same thing with this is like, it should be, even though the fatigue is going to be higher, it shouldn't be to a point where your patterns are dropping off, or you're basically just trying to grunt through it. At the start, when you start adding non-complementary, like any of this stuff, it still needs to be easy. You're just going to be a little bit more fatigued. You're just going to have to focus a little bit more, rather than just like, trying to jump in and kind of get through the messy reps that we've all done, we've all seen, but we know that it's not the best for progression in a longer term.
And it's definitely not going to give you the goal that you're looking for, with also fitness to do with it. So getting fitter with bad movement patterns, because you're always going to be tapping into that extra energy zone to compensate for that movement that you're not doing too well. So adding volume.
It's as simple. You've probably seen the
You see, it's not. I know it's not too exciting, but it's like, this is a fantastic way on how to master your gymnastics in with your CrossFit over time. And now it's just adding volume with those non-complementary. Same as where we've done it with the complementary, doing exactly the same from the cyclical. It's just the same, and it just goes round, and then it will go into a testing environment.
If you want to see true progression, if you're not testing, then kind of yeah, you just kind of.
We all know that testing. You know, when you go for a PR, that's a test. When you go for max cows on a bike, it's a test. So you find that testing environment, and now that could be what do you reckon a good simple.
You could if you're literally your first time going through this and you're doing strict muscle ups, it's maybe a set of, you could even just do like 1 set max reps.
Yep.
For us, I say us, I'm talking more about you, who's done this cycle. As I said, it's a cycle. Yeah. You've done this many times, and
so one that I love is the 30 ring muscle ups for time.
Reps for time.
Yep.
Yeah, and then something I love about that is first set maximum reps.
There's two testing points.
Yeah, and there's 2 testing points. And what you're looking at is you're just looking at the kind of the overall fatigue before, and then looking at endurance.
So with say for instance that 30 reps, you're going into that max set where you're pretty much going to nail onto fatigue because you're doing a max set. But then wherever you stop, so say you get 12 reps, you've now got to complete the rest of the reps. But now this is where you're going to see your recovery coming back in, that fatigue zone coming down quicker, and moving through to get those good reps and get that good time. So you can see it's just a nice big circle. And like I say, we picked the muscle up today because I think it's it's quite easy to explain, and obviously everyone wants to get good at a muscle up, and everyone. But this can be the same with the handstand. This could be a same protocol with pistol squats,
or even weightlifting.
Even weightlifting, yeah, exactly. It's just a nice round pattern, rather than just being random with metcons and not knowing where you're going, and just by all thinking that just by doing the metcon, and trying to test these out in the metcon, it doesn't work for most of us.
Could you go from
pretty much all of us
to there?
Yeah,
and you missed.
And all you do out of that, like I say, you may get a rep out of it, but you're not going to get the volume that you expected to do. You're not going to get the time or probably the stimulus of the metcon that's requiring the time, and it's just not going to be good for you in overall when we look at longevity of training and where you want to go with it. So even if it's not in a metcon setting, but it's just to master better gymnastics, because that's an overall. You're going to find that once you're getting overall stronger with this, you're probably going to see that your barbell is getting stronger as well. And the same instance with your barbell work, if you use it, they do crossover strength paths like that.
And you never forget this, you'll get better. My beautiful example of this, if you want a CrossFit Games athlete, Ben Bergeron, Katrin Davidsdottir's
coach. And that's in his book, no?
It's in his book. She's if you know any of her history, she's a gymnast. Her background of gymnastics,
and we all know, we see her come straight into the regionals. What was it? Was it the rope climb?
Rope climb. She
lost her spot at the games.
Yeah, so but she's always been good at gymnastics. She started with him after I think missing the games. They spent a whole year and they avoided any of this. They spent a whole year at number 1.
Alone patterns.
And then what happened next year? She won the games 2 years in a row. Yeah, it was very gymnastic heavy, but that's because she worked.
And I remember watching her at that regionals, and then seeing her again, and she was just a complete transformed athlete. You know, everything. So you could see she died on nutrition more. Everything was tight. It was super more efficient, and that's what led her to win the games.
Yeah,
you know?
And he basically didn't do any of these stages for a good year, and just.
So when we look at this, you've got to understand and not think, I'm going to do this stage 1 week, this stage. It's not like that. It's not like an 8-week stage. Like you could be alone in a cycle of this for 6 to 8 weeks or more.
She's a professional who spent a year here.
And that's what I mean. Dialing in and making sure that you're getting it right, and moving through it. Like this alone could look over 3 years before you're at this point, the testing point. Yeah. You know?
And then when you get to the testing point,
or more,
it can go again.
Because then that's when we chuck into our previous podcast. We've got lifestyle, sleeping, recovery. That obviously plays a big part for this. So if you're not getting all your lifestyle guidelines down, then this is you're going to plateau.
You're making this longer.
You're making it longer. You're making it harder. You can't tie it in a fatigued mind state. Like if you're only having 2 hours sleep and then you're trying to concentrate on good movement patterns, we know it's not going to happen. It's like getting on a jumbo jet and then all of a sudden an announcement comes over. Yeah, sorry, but the captain's only had an hour sleep. You still want to fly on this plane?
Get the fuck out.
I'm getting off it. You know, because more likely he could make a mistake. Yeah. So you got to look at things like that. You know, everything comes into play.
I think that ties well into a session as well. So kind of a big thing with any of this. So, and I think we will talk about priorities and kind of understanding whys and what you want to get out of training a little bit down the road. But if muscle ups is really what you want, doing it after an hour class or doing it after an hour intense strength session, you're mentally and physically going to be fatigued. Mm-hmm. So everything you want to prioritize or is at the top of your priority, be it weightlifting, be it conditioning, be it these complex patterns, they need to be at the beginning of your session. Yeah. You're going to be mentally more sharp. You're not going to be fatigued, and you're basically going to build better patterns through not just being tired. Yeah. We've all gone into a session tired, and then at the end of it, you get to it. You've done your hard workout. You're sweating. You're like, I need to do my gymnastic drills. Or I need to do my weightlifting drills. But then they start to get a little ropey. We've kind of I've been there loads of times.
Well, you know, if you look at how long I've been doing CrossFit, how much I abused the handstand push-up, and realise, you know, 5 years down the line, longer than that really, I'm just cutting it short. But, you know, why do I still suck at this movement where I physically got the strength for it, but it's just not tying in? It's just because I just never dedicated enough time to go through this. I've gone straight in, on the handstands,
7, 8.
Damn it! Yeah. You know, and that's not going to teach you it. And over years and years and years of that, you know, it didn't. Where with the muscle up, naturally, I just did go through this more. I don't know why. It was just maybe it was just the luck of the draw of how I done it. But with the handstand, because I was probably biased with it, I knew I was pretty good at it to start with, so I continued training that, where I wasn't good with the handstand. So what did I do? Oh, I'm not very good at that. I'm going to push that to the back of the pole. Oh, it's in a Metcon today. Oh, I'm just going to try and do it anyway, and do it really, really bad, get really pissed off, kick something over, go home with the ump, and then shake it off. And I'm sure and that's because I just never dedicated the time to go through it. And, you know, and that can be the same with toes to bar. Like I say, all the gymnastic movements, your pull-ups, your dips, it can all have the same start at the beginning, work your way round,
and then back at the same point.
Back at the same point.
Round and round. But I hope you hope this is kind of a little bit more eye-opening, because as we said, a big thing is with any of this knowledge, understanding where you sit, and don't feel bad if you want to take a step back, or even just go straight back to
and that even means like when you are, obviously, if you've got a good coach around, or you're in a class where you are scaling right, then, like, say for instance, we know if there's pull-ups in there, we know that once we're testing these Metcons, which are around this area, where it's with a complement movement or non-complementary, you know, you still need to be scaling back to that movement is tight and perfect. You know, so that doesn't mean just testing.
You're kind of working here, but in this sense, if it's in a workout, you want to make sure that whatever movement, I say easily cyclical for sure can be a bike, but for a workout purposes, say it's air squats and pull-ups, just take the air squats slower. Use it as a piece where you're recovering, because you want to work your pull-ups or your muscle-ups, you want to work the pattern. So there is the classes, if you come to classes, are a little bit more predetermined, so you can't maybe do this, but this is, you can do outside, you can do, and it's honestly, the knowledge of this can lead you for years and years to come.
So if you do find yourself that this is, wow, a light bulb moment that's happened, you've gone, this is making sense, you've got our Instagram, hit us up on that, fire away questions, you know, or if you know, there's great coaches out there, and if you are doing the CrossFit sort of side and you want to look at more inspiration, find the gymnasts of the game, you know, where they are. Don't.
I
found another love with the gymnastics now, so I am very biased with that sort of style of training now, because there's more things that I want to be able to do with it. So I hunt around and I find good things that help me learn, and predominantly constantly trying to learn more and more and more, so I can play it into the field and make people better at the gymnastics, because I think it is a big part. It's a massive part of the sport. It's a massive part of learning. It's the best way of moving well, and it sort of like ties in mobility with it, because we all know that lifters and gymnasts are quite supple. The one thing we realise I know is their mobility is good and they move well. So that's how I tie in the mobility side of it as well, learning how to be mobile with the movements and understanding what you need to do to get the range. So hit us up with any questions on any of the previous podcasts. By all means, be vocal on there, guys. That's what we're here for. We want to try and help you all to get to better places with your performance and your training and all stuff like that. So if you do like this, please push a like, subscribe so you can stay up to date. We've got loads more stuff to come out and keep rolling to do with performance, nutrition, sleeping, everything to do to help you get something that you can put into play and make yourself a better athlete, or just a better longevity.
Better person.
On all person, yeah. So I hope you enjoyed that, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you very much.